The sun was dipping low when my flight finally landed, painting everything in that soft, golden haze I've always loved. My business trip had ended a day early, and I couldn't stop smiling at the thought of surprising Daniel. I was exhausted, sure. My shoulders ached and my mind buzzed from endless meetings. But my heart was racing in the best way. On the drive home, I even hummed along to the radio, the kind of tune you don't really know but pretend you do. I stopped by his favorite bakery, picking up that lemon tart he adored, a small gesture to say, "I missed you." Funny how something so simple can feel like love in a box. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed his car parked in its usual spot. My brows lifted. He'd told me he'd be working late, maybe even grabbing dinner with colleagues. I laughed to myself, thinking, guess I'm not the only one who came home early. It felt like fate, really. The universe giving us one extra evening together after days apart. My fingers tightened around the dessert bag as I stepped out of the car, excitement bubbling in my chest. I could almost picture his face lighting up when he saw me standing there, unexpected but exactly where I belonged. At that moment, the world still felt perfectly safe. I unlocked the door quietly, ready to sneak in and surprise him. The house was dim, just the soft glow of lamps here and there, cozy, familiar, warm. But then, something stopped me. A faint scent drifted through the air, wine and perfume, not mine. My smile faltered, but I brushed it off. Maybe he'd opened a bottle to unwind. Maybe the scent was old, lingering from my own collection. Still, my steps slowed. The air felt thicker now, heavier somehow. And then, I heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, then, unmistakably, a woman's voice. My heart skipped. Once, twice, like it couldn't decide whether to beat or stop altogether. I froze by the hallway, straining to hear. The laughter came again, light and careless, floating down from upstairs. Then Daniel's voice, low, teasing, followed by a shushing sound. My grip on the dessert bag tightened until the paper crumpled. No, it can't be, I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. Every inch of me wanted to believe there was some harmless explanation, something that made sense. But deep down, a part of me already knew. That quiet, unwelcome instinct, the one we try to silence, had started screaming. I took one step, then another, the floor creaking beneath me. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning everything else. I could hear her voice now, playful, intimate, the kind of tone reserved for private moments. "You're terrible," she said, giggling. And Daniel, he laughed. That laugh, the same one he used when we first fell in love, when we used to stay up talking until dawn. It hit me like a knife made of memory. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, but it felt like the ground was shifting. I wanted to run, but curiosity, or maybe pain, kept me moving forward. The closer I got to the bedroom, the louder it all became. The laughter, the whispering, the sound of sheets. The air felt wrong, charged, almost electric with betrayal. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle, my breath shallow, uneven. In that moment, time seemed to stretch, 1 second becoming a lifetime of realization. I pushed the door open, slowly, quietly. And there it was, the scene that would burn itself into my memory forever. Daniel was in our bed, half-dressed, skin flushed, and beside him, a woman I'd never seen before, tangled in the sheets that still smelled like my perfume. For a moment, no one moved. Their laughter vanished, replaced by a silence so thick it felt like the air itself had turned to stone. The box slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud, lemon tart and shattered glass blending into something almost poetic in its ruin. Daniel's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound, like a fish gasping for air. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The pain was too deep for noise. All those moments, the dinners, the promises, the shared jokes, flashed before me in quick, cruel succession. I'd built a home with this man, trusted him with every soft part of my heart. And now, standing in the doorway, I realized that love can rot quietly, like fruit left in the sun too long. He reached out, stammering something, but I stepped back before his fingers could touch me. Every nerve in my body recoiled from him. I didn't need words. The truth was right there, bare and ugly between us. She clutched the sheets, wide-eyed and silent, and for a second, I almost pitied her. But then the scent of my perfume hit me again, sharp, mocking, undeniable. That was the final crack. Something inside me shifted from disbelief to clarity. Without saying a word, I turned away, my mind already retreating into a cold, protective calm. Behind me, he called my name, desperate, panicked, but I didn't stop. I just kept walking down the hall, toward the door, toward whatever came next. I don't remember opening the front door, just the sound it made slamming behind me. But then I stopped halfway down the steps, turned back, and something in me snapped. I stormed inside again, trembling but burning with anger. Daniel was standing by the bed now, fumbling with his shirt, eyes wide like a child caught stealing. The woman clutched the blanket tighter around her, frozen in guilt or shame. I didn't care which. My voice came out cracked, shaking, but sharp enough to cut through the air. You said you loved me. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement, a memory turned into a wound. He stammered, hands raised as if that could shield him from the truth. Mia, I can explain. Explain? That word almost made me laugh. Explain what? How betrayal fits into a marriage? How laughter sounds sweeter when it's shared with someone new? Explain what? I shot back. That you were bored? That I was gone for 3 days, so you decided to find someone else to laugh with? My voice cracked on the last word, and that hurt more than I expected. I'd thought I'd cry, but anger dried every tear before it could fall. Then she spoke, her voice small, trembling. I didn't know he was married. I turned to her, disbelief twisting into rage. Don't lie, I said, pointing at her. You're wearing my perfume. And she was, the same scent I'd given Daniel for our anniversary. For a second, she didn't know where to look, at me, at him, or at her own reflection in the mirror behind them. That silence, that heavy, guilt-ridden silence, said everything words couldn't. Daniel took a hesitant step forward, hands trembling as if the right gesture could erase what I'd seen. Please, Mia, it was a mistake. It meant nothing. His words hit me like cold rain, desperate, useless, and far too late. I laughed once, a sharp sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Daniel, I said, each word steady and deliberate. This, I gestured toward the bed, toward her. This was a choice. His face collapsed at that, the illusion finally shattering. He looked smaller, weaker, like a man who suddenly realized the gravity of what he'd destroyed. For a moment, I just stared at him, the man I thought I knew. I remembered the way he used to look at me in the mornings, that sleepy smile that made me believe I was home. And now, standing there, I couldn't see any trace of that man left. Everything about him felt foreign, cheap, borrowed. The woman sat silently, her presence shrinking into the corner like a shadow I wished I could unsee. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was fury, pure, unfiltered, justified. I'd given him trust, love, time, and he'd traded it for something fleeting and hollow. He opened his mouth again, maybe to beg, maybe to apologize, but I didn't let him. I lifted my hand, not to strike him, but to stop him. Don't, I said. Don't insult me with another lie. My voice had changed, quieter, colder, the kind that made him freeze mid-step. For the first time that night, he didn't argue. He just stood there, his face pale, eyes pleading. I realized then, he wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry for getting caught, and that difference made all the clarity I needed. I took one long, hard look at him, at the man who'd once promised me forever, and felt nothing but disgust. Enjoy your laughter, I said quietly, my voice steady in a way that scared even me. It's the last sound you'll ever hear from me." The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. He blinked, stunned, maybe expecting a breakdown instead of calm. But the truth is, I'd already broken. And once something shatters, it doesn't scream. It just cuts. I turned toward the door, the cool floor biting at my bare feet, grounding me in the moment I chose to stop being his fool. Behind me, I heard him move, a quick, desperate step, but I didn't look back. The woman whispered something I couldn't make out, and he muttered my name like it still meant something. I opened the front door again, and this time, I didn't slam it. I just walked through, letting it close softly behind me, like sealing a chapter that no longer deserved a sound. Outside, the air felt colder but cleaner. I drew in a deep breath, one that hurt going in but eased coming out. Freedom, even in its rawest form, still tastes like air after drowning. I walked to my car, the box of ruined dessert still sitting on the passenger seat, the symbol of everything I'd wanted to give. I almost laughed at the irony, a lemon tart, sweetness with a sting. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, feeling my pulse slow down as the house loomed behind me. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd never walk back into that house as the same woman again. And deep inside, beneath the pain, something new began to flicker. Resolve. The next few days felt like living underwater, everything muffled, distant, strangely slow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped. The world kept spinning while I sat in silence, surrounded by the echo of what used to be my life. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from Daniel, pouring out apologies that sounded more rehearsed than remorseful. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We can fix this." Fix? How do you fix something that died laughing in your face? I left his words unread, watching them pile up like debris from a storm I didn't cause. I started doing small things to reclaim control, transferring my savings into my own account, sorting through old paperwork, tossing out the dress I'd worn on our last anniversary. It wasn't rage anymore. It was precision. Calm, measured. Every action was a stitch closing a wound. I met with Claire, my oldest friend, who'd seen me through every version of heartbreak a woman could survive. She watched me quietly over her coffee before finally asking, "You sure about this? It's gonna hit him hard." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "He hit me harder when he laughed with her in our bed." She nodded. No more questions needed. That's the thing about real friends. They don't talk you out of healing the way you need to. On my drive home, the city lights blurred through my windshield, glowing like the remnants of a life I was done living. My reflection in the glass looked different, sharper, steadier. Inside, a thought began to grow, quiet but powerful. He wanted to laugh at me behind closed doors. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Let's see how loud he laughs when everyone's watching. I spent the next morning mapping everything out, the way I used to plan business pitches, calm, focused, surgical. I wasn't looking for chaos. I wanted clarity, consequence, and control. Daniel had always prided himself on being untouchable, the charming husband, the successful professional, the man everyone admired. That image had to fall, not out of vengeance alone, but out of justice. I opened my laptop and started digging through what I already knew: his routines, his company events, his digital habits. Betrayal leaves fingerprints. And Daniel had left plenty. Every time I found proof, an email, a receipt, a photo, it was like collecting puzzle pieces of my own liberation. My hands shook, but not from nerves. It was power. For years, I'd bent myself around his moods, his needs, his ambitions. Now I was reclaiming every inch of myself he'd quietly taken. I called Claire again that night, told her part of what I was doing. She didn't try to stop me. "He's always underestimated you," she said softly. "That's his mistake." I smiled, a real one, small but fierce. It's about time he learned who I really am. That night, I sat in the dark with a glass of wine, staring at my reflection in the window. I didn't look broken anymore, just awake. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the glass, like the world was applauding the shift I'd waited too long to make. I'd once thought revenge was loud, dramatic, messy. But no, it's quiet, patient. It's the calm before a man realizes his empire's built on lies. And as I turned off my phone, silencing his latest apology, I whispered to myself, I'm done being the one who forgives. Days blurred into a rhythm of quiet planning. I'd wake up, make coffee, and go over every detail again. Times, names, patterns. It wasn't obsession, it was precision. I wanted my next move to land where it would hurt most, not his heart, because that never truly loved me, but his pride. The same pride that made him think I'd never fight back. I wasn't just leaving him. I was rewriting the ending of the story he thought he controlled, and that, somehow, made the mornings feel lighter. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. One evening, while scrolling through my emails, I found an old thread, him bragging about an upcoming charity gala, the one his company had spent months organizing. Perfect, I thought. He'd be there, center stage, soaking in admiration. That's when my mind clicked. Revenge didn't need to be messy to be devastating. It just needed the right audience. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and let the idea take form. Calm, elegant. I wasn't going to scream at him in private anymore. I was going to let the truth speak for itself, publicly, beautifully, and irrevocably. The plan grew in pieces, deliberate and patient. While the world still thought I was healing, I was preparing. Every proof, every word, every click was a thread in the web I was weaving. There was no turning back, and honestly, I didn't want to. That night, as I shut down my laptop, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Not the soft kind that comes from forgiveness, but the powerful kind that comes from knowing you're about to reclaim your story. Tomorrow, I'd start setting the stage. Friday arrived with the kind of calm that hides storms. Daniel's company gala, the one he'd boasted about for months, was finally here. I knew every detail of that night, the venue, the guest list, the timing of his big speech. He loved to play the role of the devoted husband in public, even when I was just a prop beside him. But this time, the stage would be mine. I woke up early, brewed coffee, and opened his laptop, the one I'd quietly taken the day before. My reflection stared back at me in the dark screen, not nervous, just certain. He'd left me his password months ago. Trust turned into the perfect weapon. Inside that laptop was a goldmine of deceit. Hotel receipts, intimate emails, even photos he thought he'd deleted, all carelessly tucked into folders named Work and Projects. I scrolled through them, not crying, not shaking, just observing. Betrayal looks different when you stop feeling it. It becomes data, proof, justice waiting for its turn. I copied everything into a file, labeling it transparency. It almost made me laugh. The irony was too delicious to ignore. The same man who'd lied with a smile was about to choke on his own honesty. When the clock struck 7, I got dressed. Not for him, but for me. A simple black dress, subtle makeup, red lipstick that said, "I'm still here." The kind of look that makes silence feel like power. As I fastened my earrings, I caught my reflection one last time and whispered, "Tonight, we stop pretending." The drive to the gala felt strangely peaceful. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. It was as if I'd already detached from the wreckage, and all that was left was the calm precision of justice. The ballroom was glowing when I arrived. Chandeliers dripping light, waiters gliding through the crowd, the hum of polite laughter filling the air. Daniel was exactly where I knew he'd be, at the center of it all, charming everyone with that same easy smile I once fell for. He looked confident, untouchable. I stood near the back, unnoticed, watching him bask in his own spotlight. For a moment, I wondered if he even felt the weight of what he'd done, if guilt ever brushed past him when no one was looking. But then he laughed, carefree and proud, and I knew the answer. No. He didn't feel anything. Not yet. As the speeches began, I slipped into the control booth at the back of the room, the one handling the gala's digital presentations. I'd been there once before, years ago, when I'd helped Daniel with a slideshow for a charity auction. Some memories really do come in handy. My USB drive slid in perfectly, my file opening without a hitch. Transparency.mp4. I set it to play right after his speech. Poetic timing. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a second, not in hesitation, but in awe of how calm I felt. I wasn't scared anymore, just ready. When I returned to the crowd, Daniel was already on stage, microphone in hand, talking about integrity and trust, words that now sounded like satire. People clapped, nodding along. I stood in the back, invisible but in full control. Then, as the applause died down, the screen behind him flickered. One click, and the lights dimmed. The first image appeared. Daniel, shirtless, holding her in a hotel room I didn't recognize. Gasps rippled through the room, soft at first, then rising into a wave of disbelief. His voice stuttered mid-sentence. This was hacked, he blurted, eyes darting across the crowd. And that's when he saw me. Our eyes locked across the room, his wide with panic, mine calm and deliberate. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just lifted my glass of champagne and gave the smallest nod, like a queen acknowledging the end of a reign. Around him, whispers turned into a storm. Phones lifted into the air, recording every second. "Is that Daniel?" someone whispered. "With another woman?" Another gasped. The air grew thick with shock, the kind that swallows sound but amplifies judgment. He looked trapped. A man suddenly realizing that the walls of admiration he'd built were now closing in. I held his gaze as he stumbled toward the edge of the stage, muttering excuses no one believed. "This was hacked," he repeated, louder this time, but the crowd had already turned. His voice cracked, the same way mine had that night in our bedroom. There was poetry in that symmetry, the liar finally choking on his own story. I tilted my head slightly, the hint of a smile ghosting over my lips. "Cheers to transparency, darling," I whispered, just loud enough for the moment to belong to us, the ending he'd earned. And then I turned away. No dramatic exit, no raised voice, just the soft click of my heels against marble as I walked out, leaving the chaos behind me. Behind the doors, the muffled sound of gasps and murmurs followed like fading thunder. I didn't look back once. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, brushing against my skin like absolution. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. He had his laughter, I had my justice, and the silence between us had finally become my peace. The next morning, his name was everywhere, in headlines, in group chats, even whispered at the cafe where I used to get my morning latte. Daniel Cooper, the man who preached integrity while living a double life. Every photo, every clip from that night had gone viral. The perfect husband, caught mid-lie under the glow of chandelier lights. I scrolled through the news with quiet detachment, sipping my coffee as if reading about a stranger. The world was finally seeing him the way I'd seen him. Not as charming, not as kind, but as hollow. And somehow that truth tasted sweeter than any dessert I'd ever bought for him. His company released a statement before noon, the usual polished nonsense about privacy and ongoing investigations. Clients withdrew contracts. His colleagues stopped answering his calls. One by one, the pieces of his empire crumbled like sugar in rain. I didn't feel guilt, not even for a second. Actions have echoes, and his were finally catching up to him. The woman from that night, the one in my perfume, issued her public apology, crying about how she didn't know. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she did. Either way, she was part of his performance, and now, like him, she'd lost her audience. Days later, he showed up at my new apartment. I saw him through the peephole first, the confident man I'd once loved now standing there like a ghost. His shoulders slumped, his suit wrinkled, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He looked like a man who'd finally met the weight of his own choices. I opened the door halfway, just enough to let him see that I was fine. Better than fine, actually. His voice broke the silence first. Mia, please. You got your revenge. Can we just talk? For a second, I almost didn't recognize his voice. Hoarse, desperate, stripped of the arrogance that once filled every word. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had finally pressed him into the size of his truth. Talk, I said quietly, leaning against the doorframe. You had all the time in the world to talk, Daniel. I was just never the one you wanted to listen to. His eyes flickered, searching for a soft spot that no longer existed. I made a mistake, he whispered, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain hearing it. Just clarity. No, I replied, steady, unshaken. You made a choice. Now live with it. He tried to step closer, but I blocked the doorway with a calmness that startled even me. I lost everything, he said, his voice cracking. I studied his face, the man who once believed he could lose me and still win at life. No, I said softly. You didn't lose everything. You just lost what wasn't yours to keep. For a brief moment, the silence between us felt like the last breath before a door closes, heavy but necessary. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. The version of me that would have begged, forgiven, or reasoned was long gone. He looked down, defeated, then back up at me as if searching for mercy. But mercy is a gift, and I'd given him too many already. Without raising my voice, I said, "Goodbye, Daniel," and shut the door. The latch clicked into place like punctuation on the final sentence of a story I was done reading. On the other side, I heard him exhale, long, broken, before his footsteps faded down the hallway. I leaned against the door, not to cry, but to breathe. The storm had finally passed, and all that remained was stillness. I stayed by the door for a moment, listening to the silence he left behind. It wasn't empty. It was liberating. That quiet was mine now, carved out of every scream I'd swallowed and every lie I'd believed. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains open, and let the daylight pour in. The world outside looked the same. Cars moving, people laughing, life continuing. But everything in me had shifted. I wasn't Daniel's wife anymore. I wasn't anyone's better half. I was whole, finally, standing in the wreckage he'd made and realizing I'd built something stronger out of it. Myself. The next few days felt like slow sunrise. I started sleeping through the night again, eating breakfast without the heaviness in my chest. I even laughed, a real, honest laugh, at something Claire said over the phone. She asked if I regretted it, if revenge had truly been worth it. It wasn't revenge, I told her, smiling. It was release. Because that's what it felt like, cutting loose from a story that had been choking me for years. And for once, I didn't feel like the victim of betrayal. I felt like the author of its ending. That night, I lit a single candle by the window and watched its flame dance in the dark. Not as a goodbye, those had already been said, but as a quiet thank you to the woman I'd become through the fire. The one who didn't break, even when everything else did. The city outside hummed softly, indifferent and alive. I closed my eyes and let peace settle in, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. Tomorrow would be new, untouched, and finally mine. Months later, I found myself sitting at a small cafe by the sea, laptop open, sunlight spilling across the table. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, its rhythm soft and sure, nothing like the chaos I'd left behind. I worked in silence, the kind that wasn't lonely, but sacred. Around me, life moved gently, clinking cups, quiet chatter, the hum of peace I'd almost forgotten existed. When my phone buzzed, I smiled before even looking. It was Claire. "How's freedom treating you?" her message read. I stared at the words for a moment, then typed my reply, "Better than laughter ever did." I put my phone down and watched the waves roll in, their white crests dissolving into the shore, constant, cleansing. There was something poetic in their rhythm, how they came and went, never apologizing for their strength. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the fire, the storm, and realized it had all led me here. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you earn. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving my past. I was living my present. The coffee tasted richer, the air sweeter. Freedom has a flavor, and it lingers. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the sunlight warm my face. No more lies, no more waiting for someone else's laughter to fill the silence. Just me, whole, steady, and finally free. Somewhere behind me, a couple laughed, and for a fleeting second, I didn't flinch. Laughter no longer hurt. It no longer belonged to betrayal. It was just sound again, harmless, human, fleeting. I smiled to myself, realizing that sometimes the loudest revenge is peace that no one can take away. I walked down to the beach after finishing my coffee, kicking off my shoes as soon as my feet touched the sand. The water was cool, curling around my ankles like a soft invitation. The horizon shimmered, endless and forgiving. I used to look at the ocean and think of all the things I'd lost. Now I saw only everything I'd found. The wind tangled through my hair, and for the first time, it didn't feel like something pulling me backward. It felt like a nudge forward, gentle but sure. I breathed in the salt, the sun, the freedom, and realized how light I'd become once I stopped carrying his ghosts. A group of children ran past me, laughing, their footprints trailing behind them only to be washed away seconds later. I smiled at that. How the sea erases what doesn't belong. That's what healing had felt like. Slow tides smoothing sharp edges, one wave at a time. I didn't hate Daniel anymore. That surprised me. Hate would have meant he still had space inside me, and he didn't. He was just a name in a story I'd already finished writing. My story wasn't about him anymore. It was about rediscovery, how a woman can lose everything and still find herself untouched at her core. As I stood there, I caught my reflection in the water. Softer eyes, steadier breath, a faint smile that didn't need anyone's permission. I thought about how far I'd come from the woman clutching a dessert box, trembling in her own hallway. That woman had cracked open, yes, but from those cracks, the light had poured through. That's what no one tells you about heartbreak. Sometimes, it's not the end. It's the beginning of seeing yourself clearly for the first time. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in gold and coral, I sat on the sand with my knees pulled close, listening to the tide breathe in and out. Somewhere far away, music floated from a seaside bar, soft, distant, almost like a memory I didn't need to revisit. I thought about Daniel one last time, not with anger, not even sadness, but gratitude. He'd given me the gift of truth, even if it came wrapped in pain. Because without that night, I might never have discovered what I was capable of surviving, what I was capable of becoming. The waves whispered against the shore, steady and forgiving. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note, writing the words I'd once wanted to scream at him. He filled our home with laughter that wasn't mine. Now, I fill my life with peace that will never be his. I read it once, smiled, and deleted it. I didn't need to keep it. The message wasn't for him. It was for me. A reminder of how far I'd walked from the wreckage. The past didn't echo anymore. It only existed as proof that I'd rebuilt something unbreakable. As twilight deepened, I rose, brushing sand from my hands. The ocean stretched before me, infinite and wild, and I felt my heart match its rhythm. Calm, certain, alive. I took one last look at the horizon, whispered a silent thank you to the woman I used to be, and turned toward the lights of the city. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was this. Every breath, every step, every choice to keep walking forward. And for the first time in my life, I knew I'd never go back.